back to episode number 31, this edition of Inside the Vault, a Carolina Panthers podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Smith. This podcast is brought to you by the Keep Pounding Podcast Network, where you can find on Twitter at KP_Pounding_FSSN. And this podcast is powered by the Fans First Sports Network. Follow on Twitter at FansFirstSN. Well, my guest today here on Inside the Vault, he is a host at Fox Sports since 2013 for Fox Sports Live, Fox Football Daily, and contributes to their college basketball and college football coverage as well. Formerly a host of ESPN, the worldwide leader. He was there from 2004 to 2013, where he hosted Hill and Schlereth with Mark Schlereth. And also is on the host of the Done There, Been That podcast, which he just currently came out with. So be sure to give that a follow. Always a good time there. Follow him on Twitter and Instagram at It's Mike Hill. Mike Hill, welcome to Inside the Vault, my brother. How's it going?
Thank you, Ron. Pleasure to be here, man. Thanks for having me, brother.
It's so good to have you on. Been meaning to get you on for some time. Let's start with your background before we get into the Panthers specifically. You listed into the U.S. Air Force as a reserve after graduation from high school, and then you go into the sports hosting route. So tell me kind of how that came about after your reserve and then going down the career path you've chosen.
Yeah, so I was enlisted. I was in the actually active duty for 6 years. And then the day I got out of the military, just by God's grace, man, 2 hours after I got discharged, I got my first job in broadcasting. I had been looking for a job maybe a couple of months before I got out, and had a couple of maybes, sent a lot of no's, but got this one opportunity in Hagerstown, Maryland, to go and audition like a month before I got out in a big snowstorm. Went there. They were impressed that I was even there in a snowstorm, and I didn't hear anything for a while. And then, like I said, I got discharged from the military, didn't know what I was going to do. And 2 hours later, man, I get this call from a guy named Bob Borngesser. I'll never forget his name, news director at Hagerstown, Maryland. Asked me if I wanted this job, and I jumped at it, man. And 29 years later, here I am, bro.
Yeah. Let's go through some of your stops. You mentioned Hagerstown, Maryland, Fresno, California, Nashville, Tennessee. That's where you covered high school football and earned 2 Emmy Awards there. New York City, Dallas, Texas, and then before landing at the worldwide leader of ESPN. How did those stops kind of shape you into the host you are today before we get to Fox Sports?
Good question, man. That's in different ways. Like early on, obviously, you're still trying to figure out who you are. I actually started figuring out who I was when I was an intern, and that kind of worked for me because I was trying to be somebody else. I got the Hagerstown, I was just way over the top. Got the Fresno, calm down just a little bit. Nashville kind of grounded me a little bit and taught me the game, taught me the business, because that was the first time I started dealing with really professional sports and being on a serious platform where I was getting a lot of live shots all the time, learning under somebody who actually took me under his tutelage, had good news directors, had good people around me. So I give Nashville a lot of credit. And then just being out in the real world, and the big world in New York, just kind of gave me the exposure of seeing the big leagues, so to speak, and seeing what it was like and seeing how it's a dog eat dog world out there and whatnot. Dallas was different because that was the first time I really had any kind of turmoil in my life, any kind of issues that was going on in my career, where I got fired there, with a lot of stuff that was going on there. And but it taught me a lot as well. And then ESPN obviously just put me on a different landscape, a different pedestal, so to speak. Obviously when you get those four letters behind you and you've been there for such a long time, you get a name for yourself, then that kind of catapults you to where you are right now. So without ESPN, without all of them, I wouldn't be the person or the broadcaster that I am right now.
Yeah. And so, as I said earlier, you get to ESPN in 2004, where we actually crossed paths in Charlotte, North Carolina at a party that we won't talk about here. But, and then I was actually working for the Bobcats at the time, now Hornets. Then in 2013, you leave for Fox. So my question is, what did you learn working at ESPN versus Fox? And is there a difference working at both of those places, or are they pretty similar? If you can, as much detail as you can go into.
I mean, yeah, I mean, look, ESPN is a machine. ESPN has so many different sports and so many different shows. So it was like being part of a factory. At Fox is more like a family, but it's still just as professional. The people I felt like were not as tight. Nothing against ESPN, nothing against what they had there, but it was a different type of environment. It was a little bit more business-like at ESPN. It was a little bit more structured at ESPN, which is cool for their part. But for somebody like me who thinks totally outside the box, sometimes I just need some where I can just kind of roam free. So being at Fox was like having the exposure of ESPN, not necessarily on that level, but just being on a national level, being seen possibly by a lot of different people, but still having the field to kind of roam around in and enjoy myself and have fun and be myself a little bit more. So I give credit to both of the networks, man. Obviously, Fox has grown exponentially over the last 10, 11 years since it's been on the air. FS1 has. And I'm just proud that I'm still a part of it.
Absolutely. Before we get into the current state of the Panthers, we'll jump into the Panthers now. You worked on various remote projects at ESPN. One of the biggest ones was Cam Newton's 2011 Pro Day at Auburn. This is a Panthers podcast, as everyone knows. So, what did you learn that day, and I guess years after that as well, about the future MVP quarterback of Carolina, now probably a retired Cam Newton, who there's everyone's thoughts on him as a player, and then his polarizing personality in the media now. I'm not asking about that portion specifically, but I think he's a little bit misunderstood. But what's your kind of take on Cam as a player, as a person, and you covered him, like I said, at that pro day at Auburn when he was coming out.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I knew about him, noticed about him was that, he was like an Adonis. I was like, this guy's huge. It's like he was, as a college football player, I've been around a lot of professional athletes, but I'd never been around anything like that before. That just looked totally crazy for a quarterback to look that big and that strong and have that kind of arm. And he had this smile that was infectious. You know what I
Yes.
mean? He just had this like you wanted to be around him. It's like he seemed really inviting, but at the same time he seemed intimidating. And I knew he was going to be somebody special in the NFL because he believed in himself and he had confidence in himself. And I believe that anything that you do, whether you're an athlete, you're a broadcaster, whether you're a worker at a factory, whatnot, you should believe in yourself and your abilities. And Cam never lacked that in any way, shape, form, or fashion. So I wasn't surprised that he had that initial success inside the NFL. Obviously the wears and tears and the vigors of the NFL, the rigors of the NFL kind of wears you down no matter how big you are because those other guys out there hitting them are just as big. So, obviously the injuries kind of played a factor in his demise, so to speak, on the football field. But, I love what he's doing right now. I love that he's being himself. I love that athletes have a voice. I love that athletes of all, nature of all different sports have a platform to be able to speak and say what's on their mind and not have to go through journalists sometimes such as myself, because sometimes depending on how we feel about them, some of our brothers and our sisters can kind of misconstrue some of the words or twist the words the way they want to. Now, because of platforms like Uninterrupted coming out years ago, now these athletes have a voice and they want to be heard themselves. So, Cam has earned the right to speak up and say the things that he has. He's a former MVP, took his team to the Super Bowl, won a national championship at Auburn. He's still a very polarizing figure, obviously, but isn't that what we want in sports these days? A very polarizing figure with somebody with an opinion. And so I'm happy that he's doing that. I don't have to always agree with it, but
Sure.
at the same time, it's his opinion and he has a right to it.
Yeah. Some people would say he's the best quarterback in Panthers history. Some people would say Jake Delhomme. He also led the Panthers to a Super Bowl. And then obviously we have Bryce Young in 2023 Carolina Panthers, where we pivot now to this particular podcast now.
Well,
Mike,
first of
yeah, go
all,
ahead.
Cam Newton is the greatest quarterback in Carolina Panthers history. Let's not get it twisted. I like Jake Delhomme. Don't get me wrong. Jake Delhomme did an outstanding job getting the Panthers to the Super Bowl, I believe, in 2003. They lost to the Patriots. I remember that. It was a great Super Bowl. He had a great Super Bowl.
No one remembers that Super Bowl, even though it was such a great game because of the halftime debacle, which we
Because
won't
of
go into
Janet
on.
Jackson's nipple. Yeah, I know everybody remember Janet Jackson's nipple, but I remember it was a great game. I remember that came down right to the wire. So I remember the nipple. Everybody's going to remember the nipple. Don't get me wrong. But I
Yeah.
also remember how great the game was. I remember Jake Delhomme was stride for stride with Tom Brady in that game. So I remember, Musi Muhammad, all those guys. I remember how great
Steve
that team
Smith.
was.
Yep. Yep.
So, but when it comes to individual quarterbacks, as far as Carolina Panthers history is concerned, nothing against Jake Delhomme, but people are always going to remember Cam Newton. Cam Newton is the greatest player. They had a great linebacker at Carolina too. Luke Kuechly. Luke Kuechly. But Cam Newton could be considered the greatest player in Carolina Panthers history.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt about it. Everyone has their opinion on that. So, Mike, to put it mildly, the Panthers 2023 season, first year of Bryce Young, his rookie year was not good, to put it mildly. 2-15 record. Obviously, we all know Frank Reich got fired. Now Dave Canales, the new head coach. We'll get to Canales, Dan Morgan. But specifically, we'll start with Bryce Young. Panthers 2023 season, 2-15, as I said, Bryce's rookie year. But before that, coming out of college at Alabama, you're familiar with him, having done some games with Fox and having Bryce Young on that stage. What did you see from him coming out of college at Alabama before the Panthers selected him number one overall?
So not only do I do college football at Fox, but I'm a huge Alabama football fan. Like I grew up in Alabama, in Bessemer, Alabama, so I'm Roll Tide all the way. So Bryce Young is a phenomenal quarterback. I saw what he was able to do, not just in his Heisman Trophy season, which was remarkable, but I'm talking about the next season after that. I thought he did an even better job his next season. I have a Heisman vote, and I actually voted Bryce to be number 3 on that list in his last year at Alabama because I saw what he was able to do for that football team with the weapons or the lack of weapons that he had
Right.
around. I was even more impressed with Cam. I mean, not Cam. I keep saying Cam. Bryce, his final season at Alabama than I was with the previous season because of just how he carried that team. I mean, to me, I look at quarterbacks not only because of their athletic abilities, but how smart they are. And Bryce Young is a smart quarterback. Bryce Young under the right tutelage is going to get it right. Bryce Young in the NFL, I know it was a terrible rookie season. And of course, you look at, what the Texans quarterback did over there, CJ Stroud, and everybody wants to compare that. And look, it's remarkable. Cam Newton had an outstanding rookie season as well. Peyton Manning didn't have a great rookie season. Let's all remember that as well. So it doesn't justify one season doesn't justify how good a quarterback is going to be in the NFL. You got to have the right system around that person. You got to have the right personnel around that person. You got to have the right coaching staff around that person. And I don't think Bryce had any of that last year. And I think now with the changes that they've been making, and we'll talk about the head coach coming in a little bit later, as you mentioned, I think he'll be in the right position. But what I saw at Alabama, I saw a phenomenal quarterback who got it, who understood the game, who was smart, who was cerebral, who had the athletic ability to do what it took to win football games. And I think still the Panthers made the right decision by giving up all those draft picks and selecting him number 1.
So I was going to mention this question a little bit later, but I'll go into it since you just ended your statement on that. You still think the Panthers made the right decision because they're getting a lot of flack for that in this area, especially as you might know. You appear on the Rich Eisen show as a guest host occasionally, and for Rich. And that day back in the summer, you said you think Bryce Young will be a superstar. You said that. Can you just go into some of the reasons in case people don't watch the Rich Eisen show or any shows that you other might have appeared on? Why do you think that? What gives you that strong conviction, as you said that day? You still think Bryce is going to be a superstar?
Well, for many of the reasons I just mentioned before, I think Bryce Young is cerebral. I think he is mentally tough. I think he gets it. I don't think he's easily shaken. I saw a lot of things that he went through his last year at Alabama. I saw, like I said, the lack of weapons behind him. I saw how he basically carried a college football team against some of the greatest defenses in the nation that year and made them contenders that particular season. I mean, like, without Bryce, they might have been a 6-5 football team or a 6-6 football team. But because of Bryce, they were right in it until the end and almost made it into the playoffs. So I'll look at Alabama and I look at what Bryce was able to do there. And I know that once again, if you put him around the right personnel and the right people, look, quarterbacks win football games for you? Absolutely. But quarterbacks can't win the games by themselves. I don't care who you are. You could put Tom Brady on that team early on, and Tom Brady would not have won football games for the Carolina Panthers. CJ Stroud, as great as he was, whatever, he wouldn't have won a lot of football games with that Carolina Panthers team last year. It just wasn't going to happen. I'm sorry. So you can look at the quarterback and say, well, he's one of 11, and he's the most important player on the team, but he's not the only player on the team, and he can't do it all by himself. Did he make mistakes last year? Absolutely, he made mistakes, but every rookie quarterback, every rookie player in the league pretty much makes mistakes. He's going to get it. He works hard. He has the ethic. He has the mindset. He has the abilities. And I really believe that overall, he's got the enthusiasm, and now he's got the motivation to get it right this season. And once again, with the right coaching staff coming in and some weapons, absolutely, to help him out, I think he'll rebound this season.
Yeah, let's get into some of those offseason moves that the Panthers made. Dan Morgan is now the new general manager for the Panthers, former linebacker at Miami, 2003 Super Bowl with the Panthers and Jake Delhomme. He still, I believe, leads the NFL in tackles for the most
Yeah.
tackles in a Super Bowl that year, I believe, with 20. Somewhere around there. I may have my research off. But Dan Morgan, cut his teeth in Seattle, did in Buffalo, and now back home here in Charlotte. And he's done a variety of moves. I won't recap all of those on here, but the big ones, we signed Robert Hunt and Damian Lewis to play left guard and right guard to protect the guard play, which I think Drew Brees had a lot of that in New Orleans, having had those big guards so Bryce can see over the middle. Ashawn Robinson, who got drafted by the Lions back in 2016, next to Derek Brown, who is a big anchor on that Carolina D line. And then finally, Deontay Johnson, we traded from the Steelers for Dante Jackson. I know you've seen Deontay Johnson in his route running. So what does that move mean for Bryce Young, particularly the weapons with Johnson specifically? And then how good of a job have you felt like Dan Morgan's done so far in this year one of being the general manager?
Well, he's addressed two issues. First of all, I mean the guard play, the interior line play. First of all, let's address that. The guards. I mean, like as I remember, I can't remember. Bryce Young took a hell of a lot of sacks last year. Now, a lot of
62.
it, yeah, I think that may have been the most or the second most in the NFL last year. You got to protect your quarterback. If you invest in a quarterback, a young quarterback like that, you got to protect him. You got to give him time to throw. Now, Bryce is gonna make mistakes and hold on to the ball too long, but once again you got to look at what's open downfield. So it's just
Yeah.
like if he's got protection and nobody's open downfield, what's he gonna do? You got to eat the ball. So eventually the pass rush is gonna get to him, no matter how great the offensive line is. The offensive line last year wasn't good, so you didn't have an offensive line. You didn't have any weapons to throw to. You had Adam Thielen, who was nothing against Adam Thielen, but Adam Thielen is not the Adam Thielen of old. Adam Thielen is the old Adam Thielen. You know what I mean? I think he was like 33, 34 years old last year. And he was still effective, don't get me wrong, but he's not that guy. You know what I mean? He's not that number one receiver. So Bryce just didn't have a lot around him. So now that you've got the interior guard play taken care of, hopefully, and that's solidified, and you got the right offensive coach to kind of coordinate that to make sure that he's protected. Now you go out there and get a guy like Deontay Johnson, who, I think he's playing under, I think it's his contract season. And we already know
Correct.
how players
Yes.
play with a contract season coming out. So I think he feels like he might want to have something to prove. I don't know if he's going to be the number one receiver. I still think they're going to address that in the draft with somebody, maybe a second round pick out there, maybe like a Keon Coleman from Florida State or somebody like that, if he's available. But yeah, I think, now that he's gotten some weapons and Dan Morgan's brought some weapons around, and he's done something to kind of address the basic needs that they needed. Weapon, Deontay Johnson, and those two offensive linemen right now. Now, obviously, there are still plenty of other positions that need to be kind of solidified before they're actually a more than a 5 or 6 win team. But Dan Morgan has that pedigree. He has that DNA. From what I understand, he wants to bring in tough-minded people. He was a tough-minded player.
He wants dogs. That's his quote. DAWG,
And
dogs.
when you hear a general manager say they want dogs, that's the type of thing you want. You want that. That means they're going to be a physical football team. They're going to run the football. That means Bryce might not throw for 300 yards a game. He might throw for 200, 250 a game. We're going to run the football a little bit. We're going to play good defense. Those are dogs. Get after it. Tough-minded people. And so when Dan Morgan brings that type of tough-minded attitude into his facility, and you got a coach that he relates to already, they're on the same page, man. You already got a big win right there.
Yeah. And then let's get to Dave Canales, who is the new head coach, seventh overall in Panthers history. Baker Mayfield, Russell Wilson, Geno Smith all have in common that they were tutored under his tutelage, quarterback coach for the Seahawks and then offensive coordinator for the Tampa Bay Bucks this past season. He brings energy. He brings charisma. He's got a high football IQ. Pete Carroll couldn't say enough about him when he was on the staff in Seattle. What do you know about Dave and his background, and what do you think he brings to the Panthers?
I can't say I know much about, but would you just mention that the fact that he was with Baker Mayfield? I mean, you saw what Baker Mayfield was and what he was last year, right? You saw what Russell Wilson was in Seattle and what he was in Denver, right? And you saw what Geno Smith was with the Jets and everybody else, and then what he was with Seattle. So obviously, this man has a pedigree of like being a quarterback whisperer. So now you bring in a guy like Bryce Young, who's still in his infancy, a great talent, somebody that's willing to listen, and he's a small quarterback, like a Baker Mayfield, like Russell Wilson, small. You're going to protect him. You're going to do the right things. You're going to get the ball out of his hands. You're going to let him run when he needs to run. You're going to tell him to stay in the pocket when he needs to stay in the pocket. But you're going to set up the system that is quarterback friendly for your quarterback to win. So that's all I need to hear. And if I'm Bryce Young, I'm ecstatic about it.
Um, let's real quick before I get into the kind of your overall thoughts. I'll get you to grade the Panthers offseason specifically. But before we get to that, I see the Giants behind you there, the helmet. So I know some of your history with the Giants. The Panthers traded Brian Burns to the New York Giants, making him the second highest paid defensive end in the NFL. I ask you to take your New York Giants fandom and hat off just a second.
Awesome.
Uh, is is Burns worth $30 million a year? Number one. And was this a good move for the Panthers or not a good move for the Panthers? I know it makes them not as good short term from the edge rush position. But you have some people believe that the Panthers weren't in a position to pay Burns $30 million a year, even though that is what he wanted. And then on
Mhm.
the other hand, just like McCaffrey, I'm still getting over that one. And then just like DJ Moore, you don't let good players walk out the door who you drafted and homegrown, and that was what the Panthers did with Brian Burns.
Yeah, I get it. So the answer to your question is a yes or no. Is he worth $30 million? He might not be worth $30 million to the Panthers, but he's definitely worth $30 million to that team that needs a pass rush. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
so the cap issues, I'm not familiar with either one of the cap issues, but the Giants obviously had cap money to be
Correct.
able to pay this guy. They definitely needed help at the pass rush. I've seen the Giants get to the quarterback and not get to the quarterback for many years. So I was really, really happy for what they gave up and what they gave him for still a fairly young player, whatnot, to be able to come into the fold and be able to do his thing. For the Panthers, it may not have been worth it because maybe now it's more of a rebuild for them. Maybe they're looking at, hey, 2, 3 years from now, whatever. So we want to invest money in younger guys that we can continue to groom, that we can continue to grow. And now we have some stability, hopefully, from the GM and the head coaching position that we can actually have our guys come in. I think the Panthers over the last 5 or 6 seasons, man, and they've gone through coaches, haven't they? I mean, they've gone at least.
2017 wild card loss against the Saints, and Drew Brees was the last time the Panthers made the playoffs. And then since 2018, we've had Ron Rivera, Matt Rule, Frank Reich, and now Dave Canales as head coach. If you don't count the interim head coaches in between.
Yeah, I mean that's a lot. That's not stability, man. So if you're a player, man, you need a stable system. You need somebody who's my leader, who's going to be coming in, and you want to, you don't. And then I know they've had ownership issues, and some of the fans aren't happy with the owners and all that stuff like that too. But look, the thing is, man, like the guy with the Giants got is phenomenal for him. But as far as the Panthers concerned, they made the decision that they needed to make for their team and their salary cap. So I think it's a win-win for both teams.
Yeah, and I had Anish Shroff play-by-play man for the Panthers on this podcast, and the word he talked about was alignment. You mentioned stability, but having that alignment between the GM and the head coach really is so important. But what would you say, and I think you sort of addressed this a second ago, what would you say to those fans out there for the Panthers who are kind of saying, well, listen, I mean, yes, Brian Burns may not be worth 30 million, but he's a homegrown player that, just like DJ Moore, just like Christian McCaffrey, why are we trading our best players and just letting them walk out the door? Like, at some point, we got to keep our own talent. At some point, a Derek Brown, a JC Horn, a Bryce, like, at some point, we got to keep our own talent. You can't keep just trading your players for picks and expecting to win.
You're
I
right.
think
You're right. I mean,
yeah,
but I would first of all, I would say patience. This is a team that won 2 games last year. Burns is not going to make that big of a difference that you're going to all of a sudden keep him, and you can't pay the players that you need to pay to make it a better team. This team is not. You need a lot of pieces, and you need that money to bring in those pieces. You got to have money to go shopping, and if you
right.
give him and invest all that money into him, and it has a big cap, then all of a sudden you got a great piece that is a homegrown piece that is good for your defense for one position on your defense, whatever. But now you can't address other issues on your team. So
Right.
now you can take this and say, hey, you know what? We can fill in the gaps here. Let me give $9 million to this receiver over here. Let me give 10 million to this offensive lineman over here, whatever. These are the things that you can actually do to kind of address multiple positions that you need help at. You don't need help at one position. You need help at multiple positions. So I would say
Yeah.
patience. Not going to turn around tomorrow. The Panthers aren't going to go from 2-15 to 15-2 next year. It's not going to happen. I strongly doubt that.
Yeah.
Strongly doubt that. You might win, could win 9 games. Who knows? I mean, the
The
Texans
NFC South is very weak, Mike, as we
is
know.
very weak always. You can win 9 games, but that's progress. And if you do that with a young team that you can build, you win 9 games next year, you win 12 games the following year, and then 3 years from then, you're a Super Bowl contender. That's how you build teams with patience and stability and bringing in the right players and having the right people making the right decisions for you. It's a business. This is not about your friends and your heart and your emotions. Football is a business. And when fans and players and the owners and everybody know that, because the owners and the general manager need to know that too, because some of the players don't have loyalty as they say,
Right.
then we can all live easily and more happy together.
Yeah. I mean, as you mentioned, I think the Panthers are finally embracing a true rebuild. And I think that's something fans, I think, were frustrated with going back to Scott Fitterer's regime last year. The saying, well, we're a quarterback away. Let's drop Bryce Young in and let's let him go. Well, no, we weren't. And it really hasn't been that way the past, 3, 4 years, as you said. And so I think this where the Panthers are finally embracing a true rebuilding. They've got pieces on defense like a J.C. Horn, like a Derek Brown, who they want to resign, hit on those draft picks, as you mentioned. And then really in goals year 1 and 2 of Dave Canales, surround Bryce with the weapons, as you said, stabilize, add more defensive talent through the draft. And then, like you said, fill in those gaps in free agents.
That's it. That's it. Patience, man. That comes with patience. Little bit at a time, little bit, small things at a time. You got to add ingredients, small little ingredients at a time. You can't dump all the salt in the water at one time, man. You
Yeah.
gotta be patient. Let it taste. You would much rather have a little bit at a time, taste it instead of putting all the seasonings in and then realize you over seasoned, you overpaid, and you don't have a good dish. So
Yeah.
do it
You
that way.
mentioned the Panthers need a lot of needs. Specifically, the first two picks, 33 and 39 in the draft, 39 from the New York Giants from that Burns trade we mentioned earlier. Um, who do you think the Panthers target in the draft with those first two picks? Some people, you mentioned Keon Coleman from Florida State receiver, Lad McConkey from Georgia receiver, A.D. Mitchell from Texas receiver. And then I've seen people go Zach Frazier, center from West Virginia, getting that long-term center locked up with one of those picks. Or cornerback, Nate Wiggins from Clemson's a name I hear out in this direction, someone who's very local to the Carolinas and darn good player who may not be there in the second round. So, what positions do you think the Panthers would go for in these first two picks in the draft, since they have two very good picks at 33 and 39 that are kind of like first round picks?
Well, I think since they kind of hit the line in free agency or whatever, I think they at that pick. I think first of all you go to me because they got so many different positions that they need help at. One offensive line, especially offensive weapons or whatnot, especially a little defensive help here and there, maybe at corner and whatnot. I would definitely go best player available. I like Keon Coleman a lot. If he is available and you can get that guy, I like him a lot. At Florida State, I just thought he was phenomenal. I saw this man make some amazing catches. I was high on him all season long, watching him every weekend at Fox Sports. And if he's available and you can get a weapon like him in the second round, you better grab him. You better grab him if he's available.
It's funny. Panther fans might think, I know they're not the exact same player, but they did go to Florida State. Kelvin Benjamin played for the Panthers, receiver from Florida State, and unfortunately, he did not have the best career in the league. But he was also a first round pick from the Panthers from Florida State. So a lot of people have been drawing those comparisons.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's stuff happens. You know what I mean? I'm pretty
Yeah,
sure if Auburn had a great number one overall pick right now at quarterback, I'm pretty sure they look. Cam Newton worked out for them too. I mean, so I'm pretty sure like there are plenty of
yeah,
folks that don't work out. Because they went to a certain school doesn't mean that they're not going to be really good players. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
that's the way it happens.
yeah,
Different era too, different coaching staff, different system, everything.
yeah. No, good point.
Yep.
Um, if you are the person overseeing Bryce Young's development this offseason, I'll just give this a general open question to you. What is on his to-do list? this offseason if you're Bryce Young? What's on his to-do list if you're him?
I would say, bulk up a little bit, bulk up without losing some of your mobility. I mean, he's a small quarterback. He took a lot of hits last year. I would find Tom Brady's Alex Guerrero. I would find that trainer. I would find, like I'm telling you, man, Alex Guerrero is he's a genie, man. I don't know. I would just definitely have my training in the off season would be to bulk up, to be stronger, to be able to take those hits, and just work on your craft, man. I'd be in the playbook. I'd be in Canales' ear all the time, be talking to him. I'd be basically by his side wherever he moved to. I'd get a house next door to him. I would just try to learn as much as I possibly can and soak it up. And I'm pretty sure he's doing all this. That's what I love about Bryce Young. I'm telling you, Bryce Young is that guy. People they can say and be down on him all you want to. I know Panthers fans are down on him only because of what you saw what happened in Houston. You saw what happened in Houston is a great accomplishment. CJ Stroud was outstanding. Don't get me wrong. But do not doubt that Bryce Young cannot have just as good of a career as CJ Stroud. And we've actually seen, like I said, I saw the first couple of years in the league when Peyton Manning came out with Ryan Leaf. I remember this. Peyton Manning was terrible in his rookie season, throwing a lot of interceptions. Ryan Leaf started off pretty good. I mean, he didn't finish good, but he started off pretty good. And people was thinking that they made the wrong choice. We've seen this numerous times. We've seen rookie quarterbacks come out. I remember when Dak Prescott and who's the Philadelphia Eagles quarterback? Eagles had a quarterback, Zach Ertz. Not Zach.
Jalen Hurts.
Not Jalen Hurts. Not Jalen Hurts, but
Carson Wentz.
Carson Wentz. They both came out, and Dallas fans thought they made the wrong choice there when it came to that. Like, so it's like it's not necessarily how you start, but how you finish, right? And there's nobody that wouldn't take Dak Prescott over Carson Wentz right now. You know what I mean? Even though they're still down on Dak. So, bruh, it's your rookie season is great, but it's how you finish and how you end up your career that really matters.
Yeah. Mike Hill has been my guest here on Inside the Vault, host at Fox Sports, formerly of ESPN, and host of the Done There Been That podcast. Mike, as we get you out of here, been so good having you on. As we get you out of here with some predictions and some look aheads, what has been the Panthers' best thing in free agency or the offseason addition so far? What would you say has been the Panthers' number one add
I
to?
would say Deontay Johnson so far. I mean, like I said, I'm all about weapons, bro. You know what I mean? I'm all about, like, if you got a quarterback and you're high on this quarterback and you got rid of all those picks and players and everything that you got rid of to get this guy, you got to get him some weapons. And like you said, those two offensive guards, you got to protect them. So those two, I will start right there. And the defense you're going to fill in. Defense is going to be good or whatever. Like I said, with Dan Morgan being there, he's going to address the defense. He's going to have those tough-minded, get after the ball. We're going to run to the ball. We're going to gain tackle type players, those dogs that he's looking for, like you mentioned. So I'm not really concerned about that. But so far, those offensive guards and Deontay Johnson, get more of those and you'll be okay, Panther fans.
You kind of addressed this a little bit earlier, but talking to Panther fans and those who follow the team closely, what is the state of the Carolina Panthers at this point? What would you say? How would you identify that?
It's stabilizing. I would say that stabilizing because it's been unstable for many years. You just, like I said, you mentioned the amount of coaches that you had, general managers, all that type of stuff like that, man. It's been very unstable. Now that you got like two guys in Canales and Morgan who know each other, who are on the same page, and they can develop a team the way they want to, allow it to happen. So now that it's stabilizing, it's I think positive. I would think it's there's a rising that's coming. You know what I mean? So there's optimism that you should have for the future. You can only go up, to be honest.
Exactly. Yeah.
15. All right.
Exactly.
And then it's the NFL, man. That's one thing we love about the NFL, man. Unless you're a team that's been so down, like even the Detroit Lions came back around. Like it's bound to happen. I'm a Giants fan. Giants fan can have their moments, and then like missed the playoffs for the last 5, 6 years. Like that's just how it goes. Or they made the playoffs last year and then expectations came and it goes, it's up and down. So you never know what's going to happen in this league. Nobody thought the Houston Texans were going to make it to the playoffs last year. Nobody. They did. So when it comes to the NFL, every single season in week one, every football team, with the exception of maybe one or two that you know are just terrible, feel like they have a chance. I think with the Carolina Panthers now, I think, especially being in the NFC South, I think if you're a Carolina Panthers fan, you should think, okay, we at least have a chance to be competitive and we'll see what happens. Cautiously optimistic.
I like it. Um, Give me your boldest prediction for 2024 version of the Carolina Panthers.
Oh, wow. Boldest prediction for Carolina. Well, well, he's not come back from an injury, but Bryce Young, I think, you know, um, he would be like the comeback most improved player of the year. I really believe that. But as far as the team overall, boldest prediction. Wow. uh,
Yeah, you can say something about Bryce. It doesn't necessarily specifically have to be just like a record specifically. You can say something specifically with Bryce that still has to do with the Panthers. So don't feel free to give a record prediction or anything like that. Whatever comes to mind and is bold.
okay, all right, bold. I'm just gonna go with my man Bryce then. Bold prediction: Bryce Young will throw for because I think they're gonna run the ball a lot. Bryce Young will throw for which isn't a lot of yards these days, but 3,000 yards. He'll throw 20 to 25 touchdowns and have less than 10 interceptions next year. That's about as bold as I can get.
Okay. Um, and I only mentioned the record because you brought it up earlier. Do you think the Panthers could get to that 5-6 win in year one under Canales?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. They had a couple of close losses this past year too. I mean, they had a couple of they just didn't know how to win at the end. So yeah, I think the Carolina Panthers with what they have coming in there. Look, you guys have Frank Wright, man. Like first of all, you shouldn't have. What's my man's name that went to the San Francisco 49ers? The your
Steve
interim coach.
Wilkes. Steve Wilkes. And then he got fired by San Francisco, but that's a completely
No, that was he was a
different
scapegoat.
podcast.
He was a scapegoat. I mean, Steve Wilkes should have been the head coach of the Carolina Panthers. They should have made him the permanent coach. He would have had a little stability. The players loved him, all that type of stuff like that. But once again, hey, everybody deserves an opportunity. Frank Wright got his, and see what happens. So,
Yeah.
mhm.
Well, that's a good place to end it here on Inside the Vault. Mike Hill, host at Fox Sports, has been my guest today. Mike, all the best to you. Thanks for coming on Inside the Vault. Before we let you go, is there anything you want to plug? Anything you want listeners and folks to be checking out?
No, man, just continue to check me out on Fox Sports during the college football and college basketball season, and follow me if you want to on It's Mike Hill on Instagram and Twitter. ITS Mike Hill. Appreciate your time, my man.
And he is also the host of the Done There Been in That podcast. Wherever you get your podcast, you can check that out as well.
Yeah. Thank you, brother.
You're welcome. Well, this episode number 31 of Inside the Vault is finished. I'm your host, Ryan Smith. Please rate, review, subscribe wherever you get your podcast, and we will see you next time.